As a guitarist, how do you know if you are beginner, intermediate, or advanced? Well, after my 17 years or so of teaching, here has been my experience from teaching beginner students, intermediate students, and advanced students. I think that beginner students, their challenge is playing songs and playing songs that they love. That's kind of what they're focused on. Intermediate students are focused on playing the guitar and learning the instrument and learning music and the language of music. And advanced students are focused on playing the music that they hear in their head, actually expressing their own ideas from their own heart and their own soul. So let's break that down a little more. It's good for beginner guitar players to focus on playing songs because it's going to give you the context to understand everything else. It's kind of similar to how we learn language. When we're children, we just pick up the language, and then after you can kind of speak the language, then you start to learn the grammar and the mechanics of the language. And then as you develop further, you aren't super focused on just being able to speak the language or really understanding the mechanics or the grammar of the language. You're just focused on expressing yourself and being an advanced executor of communicating in language. Music is very similar to language in that way. A lot of times when I'm playing with a group of people and improvising, it really feels like a musical conversation. I don't know too much about this, but I've heard that, under brain scans, like when we're speaking in language or when we're improvising in music, the same parts of our brain kind of light up. So there really is there's some strong similarities between language and music, which is very interesting. But going back to beginner guitar players, I think it makes sense to start by learning songs because, like I said before, if you know the song, it's going to give you the context for understanding all the other stuff that we have to study together. Because if you jump in right from the very beginning, starting to study the instrument and memorizing the notes and learning the music theory, but you don't have the context of just being able to play songs and tie certain concepts to other practical examples in songs, then the nitty gritty of learning the instrument and learning the music theory isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. So it's good. It's good that beginner guitar players are focused on learning songs. And if that's where you're at, if you're focused on getting your first 10 or 20 songs down on the guitar, then you're probably in that beginner stage. Now, an intermediate guitar player is someone who is growing tired of just playing songs all the time. They're growing tired of the handful of guitar solos that they know. They're growing tired of the handful of scales that they know. And they really want to get to that advanced position where they're expressing their own ideas on the instrument from their heart and from their soul. But the thing is that we can't jump from beginner straight to advanced. We have to go through the intermediate stage, right? So in order to get to that point where we can really express ourselves freely, it makes a lot of sense to go through the intermediate phase where we're studying the guitar, we're learning the notes of the fretboard, we're learning music theory, we're understanding the language of music, the grammar of music, not necessarily the rules, but understanding tendencies that certain notes have and certain chords have to want to resolve in certain directions. Because that's really where the harmony and the color of music comes from, is that certain notes want to resolve, and if we resolve those notes, then it's going to sound a certain way. If we choose not to resolve those notes, it's going to sound another way. And you might as well understand the kind of personality or the tendency that notes want to have. That way, you can experiment with either resolving or not resolving in a way that is intentional to you, which is very, very important for that advanced stage. And all advanced guitar players have a really great understanding of this. Of course, there are advanced guitar players who play wonderfully who couldn't tell you what the actual music theory is. But just because they don't know the names of what we might call certain aspects of music theory doesn't mean that they don't have a deep understanding of the tendency that notes want to have deep in their brains, in their soul, and that they are making these intentional decisions. They've just gone about it a much longer way. Like they've spent so much time with the instruments that they've learned music theory on their own terms, basically, which is definitely possible. The thing is that most people don't find themselves in a position where they have just tons and gobs and gobs and gobs of time to be able to figure it all out on your own, which is why it can be helpful to study with a plan, to be able to actually help you get through that intermediate stage. So, yes, the intermediate guitar player is focused on learning the instrument, learning the elements of music theory, so that you can get to that advanced stage of really being able to express your own ideas. And once you get to the advanced stage, it's not that there's nothing new to learn, it's just that once you're at the advanced stage, you have the tools to be independent. You have enough of a solid foundation and enough of an understanding about the guitar and music, and enough of an understanding of how to practice and how to make progress, that you can more or less pick a destination off into the distance and be able to reliably get there on your own as long as you stick to the path and you put in the work. Now, advanced guitarists still benefit from having a mentor because instead of picking your own path and trial by error and seeing which path is going to work and which path is not going to work, you can still expedite the process by having a mentor. I love continuing to learn from others and taking lessons from amazing jazz guitarists here in Los Angeles. So the learning never stops, but I think that's the big difference between intermediate and advanced, is that advanced guitar players have the foundation and have the tools to be able to work through things on their own, whereas intermediate guitar players have these real fundamental gaps in their understanding, where since there's those gaps in the foundational understanding, when you try to build structures on top of that foundation with the gaps, eventually those structures fall over because of those gaps in the understanding. And it's that process of building a structure, having it fall over, building another structure, having it fall over and over again, that really is the experience of the intermediate plateau. A lot of people talk about this. Oh man, I've been stuck in the intermediate plateau for years and years and years. Well, what is that? That means that at the beginning, you learned how to play songs, you made a ton of progress because you went from not being able to play any songs to being able to play almost any song you wanted to play. And then you looked at advanced guitar players, seeing them expressing their own ideas. You're like, hey, I really want to get over there, but, and I'm just going to be very honest, intermediate guitar players have not put in the work in the correct direction to really understand the guitar and understand music theory, to build that solid foundation of understanding so that you can actually build those structures on top of your knowledge and continue to express yourself like an advanced guitar player would. So I think that that really kind of describes the plight and the kind of struggle of the intermediate guitar player. And I think the answer is studying the guitar. And there's several different ways of going about that. In my guitar program, how I help students, we study the guitar one string at a time. I break everything down into small bite-sized chunks. We have a lot of structure and direction so that students know exactly what to work on every day. We do it within the context of community, so you're studying with other like-minded guitar players who are studying the same thing. And that's the way that I do it for my students, and they really, really appreciate that. The way that I kind of put it together for myself is I went to university and I studied with a bunch of jazz musicians and jazz professors and guitarists and saxophone players and trumpet players and just the whole gamut. Um, Other people will play in bands for decades, and just that time of playing with others and time spent on the instrument, you can figure it out on your own. It takes a long time to do that. um, and of course you could learn from a book. It's not very likely that that would be successful. I've never actually met someone in person who has just learned music out of books. Since music is an oral experience, something that we hear, I think it's really difficult to kind of learn what you need to learn about music from books. But that's always an option. There's lots of ways to get through that intermediate section. The thing is just like, is the path that you're using to get through that intermediate plateau, is it reliably gonna work for you? And is it gonna work for you in a time frame that you're happy about? A lot of us, we are busy, we're working full time. We don't have a ton of time to be able to sit down and spend years and years and years kind of figuring this stuff out. In which case, if that's you, finding a plan that's proven and has worked for others and has worked for others that are in your position, that might be the best thing for you. So that you can get through that intermediate section and get to the being an advanced guitar player and expressing yourself. So yeah, I think that is a pretty good description between beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Please let me know kind of where you would self-identify on this spectrum. You can let me know down in the comments. And let me know what it is that you're focused on trying to learn right now. That would be super interesting for me to understand. And I hope that this framework is helpful for you and gives you a better understanding of kind of what to work on next, or at the very least, helps you understand why you might be working through the things that you're working through right now. Alrighty, thanks for hanging out, and I will see you in the next video.